Hello, my name is Matt Blair and this is a new web series I'm calling Popcorn and Wine. It's a series where I take a nice bottle of wine and share it with a fellow film enthusiast and comedian, and we talk about their favourite films and what they're looking forward to. I'll also be asking them some trivia questions based on their chosen subject, and then further down the line we're going to have the highest scorers of my guests have a sort of trivia off against each other. As this is a new web series, there's still some kinks to iron out with the format. I know this video is particularly long. We actually had to condense an hour-and-a-half conversation and I wanted to get it to half an hour. So I hope you enjoy it. One more disclaimer is that when we filmed this first episode, I was super ill to the point where I nearly cancelled. But I was determined to not let man flu ruin my schedule. So we still carried on, soldiered through it. If it looks like I'm about to die at times, it's got nothing to do with my guest. It's basically, I'm on the cusp of a Lemsip overdose. So I hope you enjoy my first interview in this first episode of Popcorn and Wine, introducing our first guest, Jay Foreman. Joining me today is Mr. Jay Foreman,
Hello.
musician, comedian, musical comedian.
Both a musician and a comedian and a musical comedian.
Yes, we have some wine. We have some red wine at Jay's request. It's an Australian Shiraz. It's big, it's bold, it's rich, it's everything that reminds me of you.
Can I take my first sip?
Take your first sip. Cheers. We're going to be talking about multiple movies here. We're going to be talking about things that we enjoyed last year, this year, and we're also going to be talking about Jay's chosen subject, which he has chosen. I would actually call this a franchise. Just in the same way that Star Wars and Star Trek, they're all franchises. We're talking Beatles, the Beatles movies. There are 5 of them. I would consider that to be a franchise.
I never thought of it like that, but it technically is.
It really is.
You've got the same recurring characters, you've got the same recurring themes.
Exactly that.
This is something that Mitch Benn, you may have heard of him, something that
yes.
because he's a massive Beatles fan as well. And something that he pointed out is that in the very short career of the Beatles, only 8 years, the world changed completely. And right at the beginning, when it's a hard day's night and it's all black and white, the 60s have only just started and they're all wearing suits and it feels sort of post-war.
Yeah.
And in just 8 years' time, it's the very early 70s and it feels like living memory.
Yes.
And the Beatles were there for that whole change, and you can see that perfectly in their films.
Start with Hard Day's Night. So the first
film that your dad is in.
Yes, my dad is in Hard Day's Night. Blink and you'll miss him, but he's quite visibly there. He's in the dancing. What's the song called? Let's Dance?
The song is I'm Happy Just to Dance With You.
I'm happy just
so
to dance
if I
with
remember, because I've not seen it in a while, but who am I kidding? I know it inside out. There's just before the Beatles play their song, I'm Happy Just to Dance With You, just before there's a very short little routine where there is a tap dancer with some backing dancers and they're dancing to a sort of jaunty piano version.
as was everyone.
And your dad's right in the middle with his tap shoes on.
Yep, he's really going for it.
He is, but because he's credited, it's well known he's in the film, and he's credited in there, and he's credited as choreographer.
TV choreographer.
TV choreographer.
Yeah, that's what it says on IMDb.
Except in the film, he doesn't say a word. He just does a dance. He's on the screen for maybe 10 seconds, which implies, and I think I read somewhere, that he actually did have a spoken role, which was cut short. I feel like we should point out, in case you don't know, his dad is TV's Lionel Blair.
Yes, thank you, yes. Look it up. There's a great picture that we've got in Mum and Dad's house, which has like him with all the Beatles just sort of sat down.
I assume anyone who's worked with the Beatles has their photo of themselves with the Beatles.
Of course.
I like to think as well that in Paul McCartney's houses, he's got pictures of Lionel Blair all over the place.
Yes, absolutely. Some of it, I don't really. Again, I saw it as a kid, so it didn't really stick with me. But watching Hard Day's Night, there's some weird cuts. It's weirdly, it's well written, but not very well made. Does that make sense?
Well, I guess they had a budget of about £12.
Yes, but
what happened at the time was United Artists were told there's this newfangled band and they're going to be really famous for about 10 minutes. Would you like to make a film right now, really quickly, while they're still hot?
Yeah.
And so they agreed and they did it, and they couldn't possibly have known that it would be a film we're still talking about more than 50 years later. In black and white, which is unusual in 1964, it's one of the most recent film that's been made in black and white, not for artistic reasons, but for budget reasons. I'm struggling to think, actually, of a film made post-1964 that was made cheaply in black and white. It was one of the very last ones.
There's probably a few. I mean, now, these days, black and white is a thing to, like, behold. Like, people... There's a black and white version of Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, really?
They were specifically requested that they make the film in black and white. They remastered it. They called it Black and Chrome. They had buzzwords for it. Buzzwords, black and chrome, and also there's the film Logan that came out last year.
Oh yeah.
They have Logan Noir, which is a black and white
have
remastered
they,
version.
other than getting rid of the colour, have they re-edited it in any way, like change any of the artistic decisions so that it works better
in terms
in
of
black and white?
it's just they essentially put a black and white filter on the film.
Well, I could have done that. Once, I was watching The Wizard of Oz with my family a few Christmases ago, and my dad always used to say that his favourite moment of The Wizard of Oz is when she opens the door and it goes from black and white to colour.
Yes.
But he said, just at the beginning of the film, he can never remember exactly when that bit comes, and I thought, I've got a brilliant idea. While he wasn't looking, I put the film into black and white. During the black and white bit, so you don't notice at all, Judy Garland opens the door, she steps out into Munchkinland, it's still black and white, and it went on for a few minutes, and Ding Dong the Witch is Dead started, and my dad's going, something's gone wrong here.
You're cruel, but that's genius.
Yeah.
What's Hard Day's Night? Let's see, who cameoed in it? Other than
all four Beatles for a start.
Yeah, that's not a cameo. Come on, that's a cheat. That's a cheat.
Cameos in A Hard Day's Night, I don't really know if there's any very small, notable part. Phil Collins was in it, but that's not a cameo.
He got cut. He got cut, is what I read.
No, you can see him.
You can see
he's
him.
Very,
I
very.
must have
So
missed it.
he's a 10-year-old child at this point. He was one of the extras at the end watching the Beatles concert.
There you go. He pops up in loads of things, though. He cameoed in Hook.
Did he?
Yeah, he's in Hook.
Are you sure you're not just getting him confused with Bob Hoskins? Because he looks a bit like him from far away.
No, he cameos. Like, so in Hook, when the kids go missing, they call the police, and there's a detective at their house going, well, you know, and he's sort of explaining things, and it's Phil Collins is the detective.
Why?
It's just...
It was supposed, the Beatles were meant to be, like, you know, they're basically still teenagers. They're in
They
their very
are,
early 20s.
They're like 19 or something in
I
that
think
film.
at that, so it's 1964, so George is 21. He's the youngest. So it's so clean.
Yeah,
clean
it's
cut.
true.
There's a bit
very
where
clean.
so the grandpa's gone to the toilet on the train, and then the two Beatle managers, where's he gone? Oh, he's gone down the, oh, you mean the, down the, like, you know, they can't say toilet. It's too naughty
That's
for
so
1964.
strange. But they're all smoking.
Yeah, they were, originally they were asked to change their dialogue and make it sound slightly more American, and they said, fuck that. No, we're going to talk like ourselves.
Yeah, well, I also read that they improvised an awful lot. Like, John improvised mostly.
Really?
But
I read precisely the opposite.
Really?
That everyone
okay.
thinks it's improvised because of the improvisational quality it has, but it's actually very tightly scripted.
That's
we
a
can't
debate.
both be right.
No, but that's a debate.
Send your answers in the comment section below.
Yeah. Now, again, they are all sex crazed because there's a bit where the old man goes missing.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, he's probably at this casino, and, you know, oh, he's probably turned into an orgy. And then they all go, orgy?
Oh, yeah.
Let's all go. And then they all just run off. So they can't say toilet, but they can say orgy.
Wow. I'd never thought of that before. Yeah, everyone, now that I think about it, everyone in that film is incredibly randy. Give us a kiss. I mean, the director, Richard Lester, came up with these really innovative ways of putting music on film, which has now become the way music videos look today. And so, quite by accident, they made a durable film, but it was never meant to be. It was only ever supposed to be a really cheaply made, quick, easy film to be viewed that month.
Ringo does a Sig Heil at one point.
Yeah. So, I'd forgotten this bit. This is right. This is the same film where he accuses someone of being a Nazi.
Yeah.
He says at the beginning, like, you won the war, I bet you're sorry you won. And then towards the end, he decides to go off and he wants to go parading.
Yes.
He says, I'm going parading before it's too late. What?
Yeah,
and bear in mind,
comes out of
so,
nowhere.
1964, this is when the war was still fresh in a lot of people's minds.
It was only 20 years.
So that's a bit like, if they were making a film today, it's about something really horrible that happened in 1998.
Help. This is the next one.
Yes.
I hadn't seen Help until a couple of days ago. What an intro. Like, I did not know what to expect. I was expecting just something more of the same.
You probably
Hard Day's
thought,
Night.
for the first 5 minutes, you probably wondered if you were watching the wrong film. So this strange cult from the East,
But
where they're wearing brown skin and they talk in this faux Indian accent.
Yeah, they all sound like Apu from The Simpsons.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't cool even
it's
then.
Uncomfortable.
Let alone now. But the thing is, I grew up with this film, so Help was actually my favourite Beatles film as a kid, and I didn't understand then.
It's a lot of fun.
The problem behind that.
Yeah.
If you can somehow look past that and go, well, it was 1965, that was kind of acceptable then.
Yeah.
Look past that, is it still a good film? And the answer is still no. What I think happened was, A Hard Day's Night was supposed to be a one-off. It was a massive success, and the Beatles weren't going away, so they then said, hey, Beatles, sign up to a contract, make 4 films with us.
Right.
Which was the normal thing back then, because
course, yeah,
Elvis
yeah.
was, you know, he was an actor as much as a singer. You know, in those days, if you were a huge pop star, you made movies
films,
too. That was part of the deal. There's some things I really like about the film, like the fact that they're not interested actually makes it really entertaining to watch. So there's one bit where so there's a little montage of loads of attempts to kill Ringo.
Yes.
And usually the other 3 Beatles get accidentally drawn in. There's one scene where, for no reason at all 4 of them are using the toilet at the same time. Paul presses the button to use a hand dryer.
Yes.
And it then, like, they've set up this elaborate system to try and suck them violently into the system to kill
and
them.
all their clothes come tearing
Their clothes
off.
come off.
So
the Beatles, they're supposed to be going, like, they're meant to be flailing around the room going, whoa, wah, whoo, you know, while their clothes fly around. But instead they're going, oh, hey, like, you know, like deliberately
George does
underselling
walk in, his hair's going, and he's just like, what's going on? It's just looks like an inconvenience.
And it's obviously dubbed in afterwards.
Yeah.
And they just don't care. And there's a really funny bit right at the end. Ringo says, "There's more here than meets the eye." And the other 3, they have a little subtitle at the bottom. It says, "The others laugh at Ringo's apprehension," and they laugh like this, ho 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 ho. Like, while they're delivering their laugh, they're like casually looking at their watches. Like it's amazing how little they care. It makes it so entertaining. Ho 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 ho. Do you follow Ringo on Twitter?
No, I don't. No,
it's brilliant. You're in for a treat.
I will.
It's like when you get a text from your mum. He can't spell, and at the end of every single tweet, he says, "Peace and love are."
It's lovely. There's some weird wall breaking. There's the woman who's sort of a villain but not a villain, and she at one point just looks into the camera and is just like, "I am not what I seem."
Yeah, that's Ellen LeBron, who was in. She was in Footlights, and she did a lot of films with Peter Sellers and Peter Cook and Dudley Moore. Ellen LeBron, by the way, that actress, she, in theory, was the inspiration behind the song Eleanor Rigby.
Okay, it's a fun fact nugget.
But then also, that seems to me like a fact that's just easy to make up. Like the fact that John Cleese used to live in Basil Street in Kensington, and therefore that's the inspiration for Basil Fawlty.
Right,
it isn't.
yeah.
And he said many times it fucking isn't. But people it's such
I can hear him say that as well.
It's such a tempting theory, and I'm now thinking that this fact that I've always grown up with and known to be true, that Ellen LeBron is the inspiration for Eleanor Rigby, I bet she isn't.
I had an argument with someone the other day, just to wind them up, that the song Golden Brown was not about heroin, but was about toast. I was getting so angry.
Wow.
It's just like, but it's like with 2 hands, it's like, it's a really big piece of toast.
The ridiculous premise is that their lives are in danger and they're worried about being attacked either by this Eastern cult or
the
by
2 scientists.
the scientists that are after them.
Veruca Salt's dad from Willy Wonka.
Yeah, Roy Kinnear.
Yeah.
So they decide for their own safety to record in Salisbury Plain, surrounded by tanks. Such a stupid. Now that I actually say this out loud, it's such a stupid film.
But the war scene is really intense.
Yeah.
When people start shooting, there's a tonal shift.
Yeah.
That
With
is like,
shots from inside the tank with the crosshairs.
and also, yeah, there's something unsettling about watching George Harrison fight off people attacking him with large knives.
Ha! Yeah, I forgot about that.
So,
Google it.
there was one more thing I wanted to talk about with this film. What was it? Screw it, let's move on. So the next one after that was the Magical Mystery Tour. Now, this is something that I already said was a vanity project.
So the story behind this film, this was never in the cinema, this was on TV.
Yeah.
And the Beatles basically went to BBC One and said, "Can we make a film for you?" They're like, "Yes, please, you're the Beatles." It's going to be shown on Boxing Day on BBC One. Sgt. Pepper's just come out.
Yeah, this wasn't a
Obviously,
cinema
yes.
release. It was a TV movie. It was less than an hour long.
Yeah, it's. I mean,
Mercifully.
being charitable about it, and I'm a big Beatles fan, a very big Beatles fan. A Magical Mystery Tour is unwatchable bollocks.
I know, and I watched it. Look at the notes that I made for this.
Can we show this to the camera?
There's like, this is the notes I made for Magical Mystery Tour. It was that
Compare that to how many
inspiring.
notes you had on all the other
For
films.
all the other ones.
I interrupt to say that this wine is really lovely, and may I have some more?
Yes, you may have some more. You may.
The Beatles films, this is the one I know possibly the least well.
Do you know
Actually, no,
what?
Let It Be, I don't know. We'll talk about that. But
Shall we just move on from Magical Mystery Tour? Let's move on from Magical
no,
Mystery
there's
Tour.
one last thing I want
what
to
do you
say
wanna
about
talk
it that
about?
will interest you. So Steven Spielberg, you might have heard of him. He's a very famous director.
I think I may have seen
He
a thing or two of his.
loves Magical Mystery Tour, and he claims that it's one of the biggest influences on his career. And he thinks it is a very underrated and very good film. I've got nothing more to add to that because I think he's wrong.
It's a mystery to me.
You know, my introduction to the film, by the way, was my parents had all the Beatles albums on proper records, and they used Magical Mystery Tour came with this lovely booklet describing the film, and I knew that booklet inside out. And this was describing the film, making it sound amazing. And then finally, it came out on video in about 2000 or thereabouts, and I watched it, and it was dreadful. And you know, the leaflet that came with the album had more detail and made more sense than the actual film they were talking about.
I wonder if there's a novelisation. Novelisation.
Oh, I know that there surely. No, I know there is a novelisation of A Hard Day's Night.
Really?
There is, yeah.
Yellow Submarine. This was the next one. Now, this one I watched more as a child than any of the others because it's a cartoon.
It's almost unfair to call it a Beatles film because the Beatles aren't. They're not really in it.
No.
They are at the end. They watched it and decided, actually, we like this, so we will now agree to be in it at the end.
Yes.
But they didn't do the voices. And the famous story is that when the Beatles were shown the film, I think it was Paul first who came up to the makers of the film and he says, I like it, it's great. And the other three, you've got the voices down to a T, but my voice sounds all wrong. Is there anything you can do about that? Could you do my voice again? Because I sound nothing like me, but the others are fine. Later on, the other three Beatles would then go up to him and say the same thing.
Well, because...
And I wonder if that was actually the Beatles trolling. Disney were planning on doing a remake of Yellow Submarine, which makes no sense to me.
Do you know who's going to direct it?
I don't know who's going to direct it. I know that Peter Serafinowicz was going to be the voice of Paul. Who was going to direct it?
Robert Zemeckis. It was going to be motion capture.
Really?
It was going to be motion capture like Beowulf and Polar Express. But then it got scrapped in 2012, I believe.
The reason that Yellow Submarine is such an iconic film is because it is very, very much of its time. And in a way, the animation is a bit shit. They can't draw hands. It's not...
The hands are massive!
Yeah, it's not a technically well-animated film, but it's so inventive. It's the opposite of Disney. I don't know if you know, but there was, in the early 60s, there was an American TV series, a cartoon, called The Beatles. It was like a Saturday morning cartoon.
Oh, I do sort of,
Very cheaply,
yeah,
badly made. And the Beatles hated it. They wanted nothing to do with it. And, you know, it's on YouTube now, but it's mostly forgotten. And that was terrible. In fact, that series was the reason that the Beatles they weren't enthusiastic about a cartoon. So this is the relationship that the Beatles had with cartoons at that time, in the mid to late 60s, and so that's why they weren't keen on doing the voices in Yellow Submarine. They got other actors to do it, they did a fantastic job, and the Beatles ended up, at the premiere, they watched it and said, okay, actually, we really like it, can we be in the final scene?
What's the matter, John Love? Blue meanies?
Newer and bluer meanies have been sighted within the vicinity of this theatre. There's only one way to go out.
How's that?
Singing!
1, 2, 3, 4!
It sort of reminds me of David Bowie at the beginning of The Snowman.
Yeah, like, it's wonderful, but you kind of wonder, what's he doing there? Yeah. That's my favourite fact about David Bowie, is that he, you know, for all his avant-garde, experimental, wonderful stuff, he loved Christmas.
There's still a bit of cruelty in this.
What,
movie
even in
as
Yellow
well.
Submarine?
Yes, there is. They make a monster cry. They make a monster. A monster appears.
Jeremy.
If I spoke prose, you'd all find out I don't know what I talk about.
He's a twat, that guy. I can't stand him.
Jeremy.
He's such an annoying
Jeremy
little character.
Boob.
Yeah,
he's
Mr.
Boob.
Jeremy Hillary Boob, PhD. What the fuck is he supposed to be? He's so annoying. He's so full of himself. And he speaks in rhyme all the time. He
looks
really
like a
annoys
little
me.
person version of a Blue Meanie, though.
Yeah, which is confusing because the Blue Meanies are the baddies in the film.
Yeah.
But they make friends with this little monster who looks a bit too much like the other Blue Meanies. It's confusing to watch.
It's like an offshoot species.
And I wonder if that's intentional. I wonder if maybe he's one of the Blue Meanie who discovered good... Who cares?
Let's move on from Yellow Submarine to the final one, Let It Be, which isn't so much a movie, it's a documentary.
Yeah, and it's very uncomfortable to watch.
It's a really, really uncomfortable watch.
Have you read a bit into the story of that film and how it came about? Because that's just as tragic as the film itself. And I think it helps, like, if you watch Let It Be, you kind of have to know
I don't
why
know the
they
full
were making
history.
It. Well, so this is towards the end of the Beatles' career. Like, they were at each other's throats at this stage.
Oh, yeah, I know
were
they split
suing
up
each other.
after this. It was
They split up.
announced
They
after
basically
it.
split up during it. Like
Okay.
you're watching, like, quite by accident, they made a documentary about the Beatles breaking up. And I suppose the only good thing about the film is there's a happy ending where they decide... So halfway through the film, they leave the studios and they go to the Apple offices in Savile Row.
Yeah.
So it's a smaller, pokier room, but they cheer up a bit. And then finally, at the very end, they go to do the now very, very famous, the rooftop concert.
Yes.
And that's the one time they look happy, when they're making music together. Yeah,
Yes.
there's almost a plot. It's like, how do you make the Beatles happy? get them to actually play music. It's usually John that's ruining it, and he's either sort of taking the piss and like shouting throughout the song, or he just pisses off and he starts dancing around the room with Yoko instead of joining in the song.
And it's that thing of when you see a couple turn into each other, John and Yoko. So to summarise now all of the Beatles films, as I said, it's probably one of the earliest examples of a franchise.
Yeah.
Take the good and the bad. Without those, we wouldn't have had things like Spinal Tap.
Very true.
Like, seriously, when I was rewatching some of it, it's just like, this is all in Spinal Tap. This is all parodies of that. But I don't think people, because they're not popular films, the Beatles films. It's really mainly popular by Beatles fans.
Well, I guess because the Beatles are such a huge part of those films, it's very hard to look at them as anything other than Beatle films. It's difficult to see them as films in their own right, even though A Hard Day's Night especially is actually a very good film and it stands up. Is it quiz time?
We are going to do some quiz questions.
All right.
The way this is going to work...
I mean, 2 of the questions I've accidentally answered already.
It's fine, I have spares. Question 1. How many weeks did Let It Be run for in the US?
Oh, I don't know. Let me have a random guess, and I'd say... Wait, do you mean how many weeks was it in the cinema?
Yeah. How many weeks did it run for in the cinema?
I'm going to guess not long. I'm going to say 3.
Less than 1.
Really?
Less than 1 week.
Wow.
When asked what his hobby was in A Hard Day's Night, what did John Legend allegedly write to the shock of the woman who asked the question?
Was it masturbating?
No.
Oh?
Tits.
Oh.
Question 3, still on 0, I'm afraid.
Oh, no.
There is a word in A Hard Day's Night that linguists have cited that the Beatles popularised in the early 60s. What was that word?
Was it grotty?
It was grotty.
Yes.
The dead grotty. Grotty? Yeah, grotesque.
Make a note of that word and give it to Susan.
They popularised it.
I'm just glad I've got a point.
The Circle is a gambling club that appears in A Hard Day's Night, but also appears in what film, or I'll give half a point for a franchise.
Oh, really? Can I guess the franchise first?
Guess
I think it was James Bond.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Octopussy?
No, it was Dr. No. So you get a half point. You got 1.5 points. I'll give you that. But it was Dr. No because it came out more or less like the year before or something like that. When Ringo is told to stop reading his books and go parading, what book was he reading?
This is annoying because I can tell you that the book that his manager was reading at the beginning.
Okay.
He's reading Son of Mad.
I don't have that here.
I don't know what Ringo's reading.
Ringo was reading Anatomy of a Murder. So there we go. So still on 1.5 points.
Damn it.
How many fingers on on one hand of a blue meanie?
What?
How many fingers on a hand of a blue meanie?
Oh, is it 6?
It is. 1 thumb and 5 fingers. But
That was a
yeah,
guess,
they do have 6 fingers.
Just hands are hard to draw and they're especially hard to animate, and I think this is a good way of getting around it is by deliberately making them wrong.
Not just that. Well, at the time and still to this day, people can. Most characters have 3 fingers.
Yeah.
Because it's cheaper.
Yes.
It's cheaper. So apparently.
Except in Japan.
Except in Japan. But
which is a story for another episode.
But the Beatles, or the people that, not the Beatles themselves, but the people making Yellow Submarine, it was apparently a fuck you to the people that were only doing 3 fingers. They were kind of going, well, we'll do 6 in Help. Which Beatle can be seen pocketing jewellery whilst in the shop, in the jewellery shop?
Oh.
But which, yeah. Which,
is it John?
No, it's George.
It's George.
Which Beatles song is being played on the sitar in the restaurant in Help?
Hang on. There's 2. They play one song and then they switch. No, it's A Hard Day's Night.
It is A Hard Day's Night. That's what I've got there. So we've got 2.5 points right now. What does George shout to warn Ringo of the bomb in Help?
I can tell you his precise words.
Yep.
Hey, it's a thingy, a fiendish thingy.
It is a fiendish thingy.
That's one of the lines that he delivers with the most gusto in the whole film.
It's a good line. Whose cousin is the bluebird of happiness?
Oh, he says at the end of the film. He says it's the last line in Yellow Submarine. It's the Chief Blue Meanie, whose name has he got a name, or is it just the Chief Blue Meanie? Yeah.
Chief Blue Meanie. Okay, last question.
All right.
Last question.
I feel like I'm going to be bottom of the leaderboard already.
Well, at the moment you are on 3.5 points. 3.5 out of 10. In the old British cartoon Super Ted, The character of Texas Pete was played by which Beatles movie actor?
It was played by none other than Victor Spinetti.
It is Victor
the
Spinetti.
Pointy-faced Welshman who is in almost all the Beatles films.
Yes.
And a lovely bit of trivia you might not have spotted. George Harrison's mum said that she would only go and see the films if he was in it.
Really?
Because she liked him. I mean, she was joking, obviously, but apparently, so they were asking Victor Spinetti if he would be in Magical Mystery Tour. He says, "Oh, I don't know, I'm a bit busy." He said, "Well, my mum says she won't see it unless you're in it."
Oh, that's sweet. Well done.
Thank you.
They weren't too cruel.
Some of them were.
Some of them were quite cruel.
Who's stealing jewellery? Who cares? I hope my credentials as someone who knows his Beatles shit are intact. Even though
absolutely.
I got 4.5.
I think the rest of this will attest to that. So, other than Beatles films, let's just now get into the sort of...
Well, we talked about Early Man.
Early Man. You like your Aardman animated
films in general? I can't tell you how
general?
excited I am about Early Man. So I follow Aardman very closely, and I've known that Early Man is coming for a good 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's how long it takes to make these films.
Yeah, it takes about 4 years to make one frame of an Aardman film. And I've been tracking its progress very carefully. So a friend of a friend used to work at Aardman. And every time she used to come around and visit, she used to bring these things from the studio in Bristol. She was working on, did you see Pirates in an Adventure with the Scientists?
I love that film.
Such incredibly underrated,
So it's
fantastic
really
film.
punk as well. It's got
Yeah.
that sort of vibe to it. It's just...
So, I mean, its biggest flaw is that Hugh Grant's in it, and he has no business being in that film, but Sony made them do it.
Yeah, but he is quite good in it. Do you
He's
not think?
all right,
fine.
I suppose.
He's fine.
Anyway, so she used to bring back all these props from the film, like
Yeah.
little models that they didn't need anymore, like tiny, half a beard that they used on an extra in a character in the background.
That's
and
great.
I had a drawer filling up with this stuff. It was wonderful.
Amazing. It's going to be great.
I really hope it is going to be great, because
gonna be great.
the thing about Aardman, their films are very expensive.
Yeah.
And I'm always worried that they're one film away from going out of business. I can just see the BBC News article, "Beloved studio Aardman goes out of business," because it has happened to so many British animation... Cosgrove Hall, the makers of Count Duckula and Danger Mouse and so many great things, they disappeared. It can happen to any of them, surely.
Plus also, not to be too sad on the whole thing, but since I can't really do Wallace and Gromit anymore...
Yeah, well,
Because,
Peter
since he
Sallis was
died.
on borrowed time for some time. Actually,
Yeah.
I'll tell you what's really sad. So his eyesight was failing him towards the end of his life, and he actually was, when he was doing the voice of Wallace in the last film, Curse of the Were-Rabbit, and also the one after that, the TV one, the Loaf, the
And I
Master of
like
Loaf and
Curse
Death.
of the Were-Rabbit. That's a lot of fun to
Oh,
watch.
they're great.
That's
a
lot of fun.
Aardman, in my opinion, can't put a foot wrong. They're great. But Peter Sallis never saw the film. He heard the film, and his lines were fed to him and then repeated because he couldn't read the script.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
I know. Yeah, you said that you went to see Star Wars at 3 in the morning to make
3:30 in the
absolutely
morning.
sure that you were the first to see it and you could avoid spoilers. I'm going to be doing the same thing for Early Man, and I hope
I
it's
don't
good.
blame you. I don't blame you. Was there anything in particular last year that you saw
Last
in
year?
the cinema? Yeah, 2006.
Does it
17.
count if I can think of a film that I desperately wanted to see, heard great things about, never made the time for, and I now really regret it?
What is that?
Paddington 2.
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh,
either.
really?
I haven't seen it yet either. I'm gutted.
Well, that's good that you can't spoil it for me, because I've heard nothing but amazing things
Same
about
here.
that film.
Because the first one is such a joy.
I got a phone call about 2 weeks before the film was due to be released saying, could you audition to be a couple of voiceovers in the film? Apparently there's a parrot has one speaking role, and they wanted the voiceover of an advert for dog food.
Okay.
Well, I auditioned and didn't get either part.
Now you do dog food commercials.
And you're not big on sci-fi or anything like that, are
No,
you? You're not
it's...
like...
And I feel bad because, so many people with taste in films that I respect, they're massively into their superhero films and they love their Marvel films, and they leave me cold somewhat. The thing that I find strange and that maybe I should get used to is that they are tongue-in-cheek. They're deliberately silly films.
Yes.
But I watch them going, I can't enjoy this, it's for children. And I feel the same way about Doctor Who, but I suppose it's only because so many people assume from everything else that I make and do and like, that I must surely love Doctor Who. And that's what makes me quite
But after everything we've
reticent.
just talked about with the Beatles...
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having
very
me.
much. Is there anything that you'd like to plug?
Depending on when this goes out, I am currently doing a UK tour, so please go to my website, which is www.jayforeman.co.uk. Come and see me at a gig. I'm currently doing a tour of my children's show, Disgusting Songs for Revolting Children.
And they're wicked songs, they're absolutely awesome.
Thank you.
But find you on Twitter at Jay Foreman.
At Jay Foreman.
Same with Instagram, or do you not have Instagram?
I've only just joined Instagram, and I've uploaded only one video, and it's not very good.
And is it at Jay Foreman?
No, it's jforeman51. Someone's taken Jay Foreman. Now follow me on Twitter, go to my website, see my shows.
Facebook?
I need to take better care of that as well. But yes, mostly
You do
Twitter.
have one.
I've got one.
Yeah, that's fine. So find him on all those things. Find him on all your YouTube shows. Was it Unfinished London?
Oh yes, I've got a YouTube channel. So I make there are live clips of doing my songs, and I make videos about politics, geography, and cities. So do check that out.
Do so. Well, thank you again for joining us. I've been Matt Blair. This has been Popcorn and Wine. We'll see you another time. Take care. Bye bye. Thank you once again to Jay Foreman for joining me on the first interview, and thank you for also watching and joining us. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe. Also, please check out the links for Jay's social media and website. They're all going to be in the description below, as well as my social media, my Twitter at @MattBlair, my Instagram at @MattBlairMusic. You can also find me on Facebook. I'm also part of a monthly musical comedy night called The Distraction Club. The next one is on February the 6th, but we do it on the first Tuesday of every month. It's at the Phoenix Cavendish Square in Oxford Circus. I'm hoping to make this a weekly series, and I'm doing it out of my own pocket at the moment, but down the line I will be starting a Patreon page. Consider this proof of concept. I really appreciate everyone watching this video, and I'd also appreciate some feedback in the comments below, but be nice. As I've said before, I'm very sensitive. We'll see you again next time for Popcorn and Wine. I've been Matt Blair. See you next time.